Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bed Tech Show. We're your hosts, Ben and Ethan, and we're here to share another round of some good tech news here in the universe. So, we've got some exciting things going today. We're going to be talking a lot about some AI and as well as getting into the EV market space and covering the Microsoft Activision acquisition and where that is at. So let's go ahead and get started with ChatGPT releasing its own iPhone app. So it looks like here that we've got the ChatGPT creator is releasing a native iPhone app to get a broader customer um, I guess, customer base for ChatGPT. Not that they really need a broader customer base. It's pretty well known, and there's been a lot of users. But the creator of ChatGPT is rolling out an app that will bring artificial intelligence to smartphones. It's going to be releasing the uh, wide list. It was supposed to be released here pretty soon, and it's going to be part of the iOS operating system, which will include running on iPhones and iPads. And since the release of ChatGPT, we've heard users that they love using ChatGPT on the go. And so being able to bring this to your native iOS device will bring it a step further in making sure that other people have access to it on the go. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Ben. Do you think this will have a greater impact on AI and how consumers use it? Or do you think it's going to bring more problems than it was initially intended?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big step towards AI. I don't know if it will necessarily bring problems. Um, I personally don't think it will. I think it will it's just going to allow people to be faster and smarter with everything they do. Um, and it'll serve in so many places from a mobile aspect, whether it's like, you know, helping guide people on where to go for food, or helping guide people on what to do, or giving people information in a discussion, or when you're in a meeting with someone and you want to have a conversation about something and you're trying to brainstorm, that's you can use ChatGPT. It just the convenience level just increases significantly when you have it on your mobile app. Um, and with that being said, I think if there's anything negative with ChatGPT, which there are some negative drawbacks to it, but if people are going to use it maliciously, or if there's a negative impact on it, I don't think this will enhance the negative impact any more significantly. It will. I don't think it'll bring new negatives to the table. It might increase whatever negative impact ChatGPT and AI have, um, a little bit more, but I think there's a lot more upside to this than there is downside. And I think a lot of people are happy with it. The only problem I see from a consumer perspective is OpenAI has the free version of ChatGPT on a browser, but they don't have a free version of the app. I don't think. I think you have to have the subscription, and so if people want to access it, I think they have to pay.
Yeah, they'll
What is
have
it, like
to, I
10 or
think,
$20 a
upgrade to the
month?
plus. Yeah.
Yeah, but that also allows you to access a better version of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So, um, personally, I'm kind of excited for this. It's making me tempted to pay for it just to have it on my phone. Um, but when I'm realistic, I'm like, I don't know if I'll use it that much, and maybe I'm not being creative enough. You know, maybe I'm not being creative enough in how I use Chat GPT. But um, throwing it back to you, a question for you. What do you think the potential benefits and drawbacks are for people now that people have it in their pocket? They'll probably rely on it more, and I think there's going to be a lot of upside. But do you think? What do you think the drawbacks are? What do you think the positives and negatives are? Do you think, am I missing something here? What am I ignoring?
I think I think it is going to have a lot of benefits to people. I mean, it'll bring a tool in a more accessible way that people will be able to access it. I think that
Hmm.
is a huge leap and a huge benefit. One of the things, though, that I think could be a big drawback for this is that all the problems that we have seen this year with ChatGPT potentially could be magnified because there's going to be an increased user base,
Yeah.
especially with iPhones. So, like for instance, kind of like the premise of my argument here is if an iPhone has a problem, they ship out millions of devices like right as the release date is. And so if you have one problem that affects, say, 5% of your phones, well, that's um, several 100,000 phones. And
Yeah.
so it, even though it's a small percentage of the devices, it just seems to be magnified because there are a lot of users that it affects. And
Yeah.
so I think that's going to kind of translate to this as well, because we're going to see a lot more people have access to this. Anytime that there is a flaw, while it may just be a small percentage of the overall user base, because there's a lot more devices using it, it will seem like it's a little bit more magnified, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah. No, I can understand that point because it's just gonna be such a large user base now. And that also brings in more creativity, whether to do positive or negative with it, right?
Right.
It bring in more testing and more experimentation, and especially on the go, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're on the go, there's so much happening in your world around you that it might trigger a thought or might trigger a creative idea to try and test with Chat GPT and AI, and that could have positive or negative impact. I can see that happening. That I mean that's a valid point. um, I'm hopeful that this will be more positive than negative.
Me too. Because I think this is really cool. I'm I'm really excited to be able to have this a little bit more accessible. I mean, generally my experience using ChatGPT has just been at a computer when I'm doing stuff for work or doing stuff in my personal life. And so I haven't really used it a lot for my phone. But now, this could be like a good tool to use when trying to put the kids to bed and generating a cool bedtime story and whatnot.
Yeah,
And being able to have your kids put some input into the story and manipulate it into something better, something cool.
yeah, and I also think just there have been instances when I've been on the go, and I thought, man, it'd be really cool, like if I could just have some kind of some kind of insight or inspiration here on this thing that I'm talking about with someone, or a little bit more creativity that I'm too lazy or I'm having, some, brain farts or whatever.
Mhm.
It'd be nice to have that in my pocket. I can whip it out and just put a prompt in and get the information that I want. So it is exciting. It definitely adds more temptation to buy the subscription.
Yes. Because I haven't gone into the subscription yet, but now I think probably going to need to. I use Chat GPT enough that it's a little bit justified for me to
Yeah.
spend a little bit more money on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's how I feel.
might just
So
have to cancel Netflix and then, I can justify spending that money on Chat
yeah,
GPT
just be
instead.
entertained by Chat GPT's response instead of Netflix's show.
Yes, that's going down the toilet anyway. Uh, Speaking of things that people might have thought that was going to go down the toilet, looks like there may be some hope for Microsoft here. Looks like the Microsoft Activision merger has been approved by EU regulators. So Microsoft announced a deal last year to acquire Activision for $68 billion, and there have been a lot of blocking and going back and forth between um, EU regulators, and the European Commission has concluded that the deal can pass thanks to comments of Microsoft that they made related to their cloud gaming. And one of the quotes that they had is that they found that Microsoft would have no incentive to refuse to distribute Activision games to Sony. And even if Microsoft did decide to withdraw Activision games from PlayStation, this would not significantly harm the competition in the console market. So I'm actually surprised by this because this actually seems like a smart statement.
Yeah, I think this is
Where
exactly what we talked about.
Yeah, whereas like the EU has constantly been saying things that have seemed uneducated in this realm. And so it's nice to see that finally some of this education has come to their forefront and they are using it to approve this deal. This doesn't mean necessarily that the whole deal has been finalized and the deal has closed. It just means that the EU is not blocking the deal and is allowing it to go through. So it still has many more steps to go through. And so I wanted to ask, how do you think this ruling from the EU is going to affect the overall deal between Activision and Microsoft?
Hmm. Good question. So, first of all, I was thinking of the expense, right? And how Sony was trying to block it and make this. I'm sure Sony knew in the long run that they were going to lose, and they were just trying to make this as expensive as possible for Microsoft.
Mhm.
And so the expense might impact the deal. It might be I don't know if there's a potential for renegotiation, but if there's no renegotiation, then Microsoft is going to try and recoup some of the costs by doing some things that may not be beneficial for all gamers.
Right.
Meaning they might make things exclusive, or they might release DLCs that are exclusive to Xbox users, or whatever it might be. So that's kind of my first thought is they spent a lot of money on this. Not just the deal, but the legal
Yeah, the legal fees.
situation with it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I'm sure it was not cheap. The other thing too is in my mind, I'm sure that they're now that they've got the EU approval, I'm sure they're thinking, let's get this done as fast as possible. Like let's get
Mhm.
signatures ASAP. Let's just burn through this. I mean, I would assume that they've kind of been prepping for the best case scenario of, if it does get approved, let's get everything aligned so that we can get the deal done fast. I would not be surprised if they try and push this as fast as they can, like top priority for Activision, just because it's such a big deal. They want to get going on everything. And so those are the two thoughts that I have as to how this situation impacts the deal. Um, those are my thoughts, but I'm curious to know, do you think this made, because this is a big deal, right? And this is roughly $69 billion. 69, you know?
Yeah.
But it's a big deal. And so do you think this will impact future gaming acquisitions? And I think we've kind of briefly talked about it in past episodes, but do you think this will impact game development, third party game developers and their approach to things and the overall gaming experience for the users? What are your thoughts around that?
I think it does. As much as I want this deal to go through, I think it could potentially have a negative affect on the future of gaming.
Mm,
Because if this goes through, this sets a precedent to allow future deals to go through easier.
that are
And so,
big.
yeah. Um, and so, if you have big companies like Microsoft acquiring all of these developers, that means that they have an influence on how games are developed, um, how kind of like the strategy behind how games are pushed out by these developers, and publishers as well. And so it it could potentially have a negative affect, and it will set um, quite a big precedence on future deals. Because if it was approved for Microsoft to acquire Activision what's to stop them from acquiring everything else if they just have enough money?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of creates like not a monopoly because it's not just Microsoft, but an oligopoly where it's like
Mhm.
only a few players in the market and they control the market share. And if they start working with each other on price points
Right.
and strategy of revenue, right? Then they could really have a negative impact on the consumer experience in the market.
Hmm.
But then as a consumer, there's no alternatives to turn to, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I can see how you would say this could have potential negative impact. It does set that precedent. The the future of developers have to keep in mind, you know, if you start to get big and you create a game that has a lot of traction, you're going to get offers to be
Hmm.
gobbled up, right?
Yeah.
Do you think developers, if you were a developer, let me ask you this. If you were a developer and you created a game that just was nominated for game of the year, maybe didn't win game
Mhm.
of the year, but was nominated for game of the year, just phenomenal game across all platforms. And you were super profitable that year. Growth was awesome. Would you consider a buyout from a large corporation like Microsoft or Sony, or would you consider pursuing additional game development as a third party? And I know I'm asking that with like zero context to deals that you're being
Yeah.
offered and resources that you could have, the pros and cons. This is so high level and so generic, it's almost impossible to make a decision. But I'm trying to gauge your ethics and morals on like what would be your direction if you were a third
So
party developer.
I'm an extremely unethical person and very selfish. So if it doesn't benefit me, I'm
But
not
you're
going to do it.
honest. But
Yep.
you're honest.
I am honest, at least. So, if I were to look at it, we had an extremely profitable year. We had one good game.
Yeah.
What's to say our next game is going to be just as good or have that? And so here you've had a great year, and now you have this like guaranteed deal. You've got some big company that is going to buy you out, give you more resources to continue to develop games, and even whether your next game is good or not, you still have those resources.
Mm-hmm.
From a business standpoint, just purely like looking at financials, it makes a lot of sense to move forward with that acquisition.
Yeah.
Looking at your consumer base, though, if you were to factor that in, going with that acquisition may not be in the best interest for your consumers.
Mm.
Just because, when they do that, you're going to have um, a lot of requirements from that parent company in how you develop games, and that could either positively impact or negatively impact how your game turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it could be like a Halo situation where you've got Microsoft saying this needs to go out. Like, okay, we can send it out. It's a half baked game. It's
Yeah.
okay just because
Yeah.
it's Halo. Everybody's going to love it anyway. When in fact they really didn't because it was only a half baked game.
Yeah. That's a fair point. That's a
So,
very fair point.
so I mean, yeah, if it would really have to be what I would prioritize at that moment. And mostly like if you were a private company, um, and maybe you were looking to go public, you have to prioritize your shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking that deal, that does prioritize your shareholders, um, and what you're supposed to do anyway. So
Yeah.
it it's kind of a lose-lose situation, but taking the money, that's a good deal for at least right then and there.
Yeah.
So What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that? What would you do?
No, you bring up some really good points. I there's so many pros that could happen with the deal, right? Like you said, resourcing, you get resources, you get stability, you get, um, a huge number of options when it comes to um, where you pull your workforce and you get backing, right? And then you'll get a lot of money, right? So like if you're a smaller game developer and you're offered a lot of money, and let's say you have some people in your company that like your employees are also part owners, or they have some stock options or whatever, they're going to get paid as
Mhm.
well. And so like I can see that being a benefit. You care for your employees, you care for the people that created the game, you want what's best for them. The flip side is, like you said, the consumers, they might see it as a sellout. They might see it as a negative situation where um, your reputation goes down even prior to a potential second game being pushed out.
Mhm.
And then if you push out a second game that's below what your standard is, a lot of people are going to blame the fact that you went with this acquisition and you were absorbed. And then you might even lose some of your consumer base
Right.
because you might go exclusive to one console, and then it's like, well, we lost half of our consumer base. So I think you're right. It comes down to the priority of what you want. Do you want to prioritize the cons? Do you want to prioritize the consumers and making sure that the culture and the people who are actually participating in gaming are happy, or are you looking out for your own in your company and for yourself because the deal is going to benefit you,
Mhm.
right? And personally, this is what I would do. The deal is really good. My thought is this: listen, I gave the market a really good game. That was my team, something we could be proud of. We gave them a solid game. It was, nominated for a lot of awards, maybe won a couple awards. And it was so fun to play. It's so fun to play. And our team did that. We're proud of that. And we don't know what the future holds. We can make a really crappy game if we stay third party. We might make a really crappy game if we are absorbed. But we made something awesome that we're proud of. Let's get that bag. Let's freaking do the deal. Let's
Uh,
get the money. We gave you a good game. We should be rewarded for it. And here we are. So that's what I would do.
I like it.
And then everyone in the company, ideally, they have some little piece of ownership, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, guys, you're going on a trip with your wife or your husband or your spouse or your partner or your family or whatever, or you're by yourselves or with your friends, and you can pay for all of it because you're getting freaking rich, you
Yeah.
know? But maybe that's me being selfish. But I think that'd be really cool, kind of be able to a little bit of a extra, icing on the cake.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
It's gonna be interesting to see what Activision does with all this new cash they get for this deal. Like,
true.
I mean, that opens up a lot of doors and a lot of resources for them. And
Yeah.
so,
I wonder if people will leave Activision because they don't want to be a part of the Microsoft family.
mhm,
Maybe they start something new.
maybe. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see, just what happens with inside of Activision
Yeah,
with
that's
this
a
deal.
really good point. That's a really good point. We'll see what
So,
happens.
yeah. See what happens. We'll keep everyone updated. All right. Looks like there's a Supreme Court ruling to continue to protect Google, Facebook, and Twitter from what users post. All right, Ben, you want to walk us through this one?
Yeah. So a lot of people have been complaining that, hey, these big tech companies, you allow people to post a variety of things. You should be liable for what the users post. And so we want to sue you for that. But the Supreme Court actually said, no, we're not going to address this. We're not going to make a ruling on it. We're going to leave it as is, where they are not liable for users' content. And it's very interesting because the Supreme Court, when they make a ruling, that sets a very big, we talked about precedent and precedence. That sets a large precedence, right? But the Supreme Court's not even addressing it. They're sending it back to a lower court to reconsider this decision to move up. Because what it says right here that plaintiffs have failed to allege that defendants intentionally provided any substantial aid to Reina attack or otherwise consciously participated in the Reina attack, much less the defendants. They're talking about a specific post where big tech allowed the post to happen, which the plaintiffs were trying to say, hey, this caused harm physically to people. Systemically assisted ISIS as to render them liable for every ISIS attack. So they're trying to blame big tech in this post. And the courts are saying, hey, the plaintiffs make this statement, but they failed to allege that the defendants intentionally provided it. So they didn't have any kind of real substantial evidence here to back it up. So the idea is Supreme Court's not hearing this case. They're saying we're not going to even hear this case. We're not even going to deal with it. We're sending it back down to lower courts. You guys can deal with it there, but right now we're not going to deal with it. And essentially, they're protecting. I shouldn't say protecting. They're allowing big tech. They're alleviating big tech from assuming the responsibility of their users' posts, and which, to some people, they're not happy about it, especially if they don't like big tech. But my personal opinion is this: if you create a platform, you can, and you have millions of users on it, it's almost impossible to regulate every single post. And it's almost impossible to really say, hey, I'm liable for that. You can set your standards, set your warnings, and have as much robotic and automated regulation as possible, but you're not going to catch everything.
Right.
And that's part of the community to report things, right? And to raise flags. And so as a result, I think it's unfair to hold big tech accountable for every single post. And I also think it's very difficult to draw a direct line to say this post caused these actions in real life that caused murder or harm or stealing or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah, there's
so
not a lot of causation there.
Correct. There might be some inspiration, but big tech isn't forcing anyone to do anything, and they're trying their best already to regulate to a certain extent.
Yeah, and if to your point, if you were to look at tort law for this, there needs to be a but-for cause that caused the actual harm. And this would not be that cause of the harm. I mean, it would be something so far removed that could have done that.
Yeah. Do you think if there is eventually a court ruling that big tech needs to be liable for users' posts, do you think that has an impact on free speech?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it does because here, in my opinion, if they were to find big tech liable, that kind of removes the ability of somebody else to choose. I mean, here we've got users who are making a conscious effort to say what they want that may be in violation of the terms of use for using that platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's still their choice. I mean, humans have that ability to choose. And if you make the platform liable, essentially you're taking away that ability for somebody to choose and also removing a forum for somebody to have to have free speech. I mean, it, whether it is a violation of the terms and conditions of that platform, people still have the ability to use free speech so long as it's um, within the bounds of the law. I mean, there's a lot of legal precedent that can affect how we speak, but generally people have that right of free speech. And so I think putting all of the liability on big tech companies is is not a great idea. And so I think it was a smart move for the Supreme Court to fail to address this and choose not to. Um, that way that they didn't set a precedent that could have a negative effect.
I agree. And I also think too, if you take it to an extreme level, right, these platforms allow for people to express their ideas and their thoughts. And yes, they are private companies with their own. I mean, when I say private, I mean they're non-government, right?
Mhm.
They're their own companies. They are publicly traded, but
It's not a
their
public
company,
company.
yeah, they have their own terms and regulations that you need to abide by, but they allow people to express their thoughts and opinions and essentially express their freedom of speech and etc. If we were to take this to an extreme level, okay, and we are holding the enabler accountable, then if a child is to scream hate crimes, right? Or let's just say, not even hate crimes. Let's just say a child screams derogatory terminology or terminology that could really piss someone off, whatever it might be. Are we going to hold the parent accountable for the actions of whoever's pissed off or maybe inspired to go do something? It's like, okay, if my child says something and it causes someone to go and drive a vehicle and do something bad, right?
Mhm.
We're going to go back to the parent of the child and be like, you're held accountable for murder. Like, that's so indirect.
Right.
And it doesn't, it's like you said, it's not causation. And so I think that's kind of the same concept here is we're blaming the enabler. We're blaming the platform that had maybe not necessarily the enabler, but the platform that allows people to express these opinions. We're blaming them and trying to say, you're at fault for actions taken by people who received content from your platform and chose to do bad things. And it's like, that's not, they are not the ones forcing action to
Mhm.
be taken. People are choosing to take action. And I think they're doing their best. I mean, like I said, to an extent, to try and uphold their regulations so that they can avoid harm, so that they can avoid any, insightful or negative posts, inappropriate posts. Um, and I just think it's kind of ridiculous that people are trying to blame big tech for actions that people do outside of it because of what they read on big tech. I
Right.
think that's I think that's an egregious connection to make, and it's not valid.
Yeah, it would take away the accountability of the individual actor that did something wrong.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think that is the correct way to do something. I mean, the person that actually did the harm should be the one that is held accountable, regardless of what was said or what was even being influenced for them to say
Yep.
and do.
Everyone receives information, whether positive or negative, every day on technology, off technology, throughout their day, every day.
Mhm.
It is up to the individual to choose how they react and act upon that information.
Right.
And the accountability lies on that individual, right?
Exactly. Like if I were to throw my controller at the TV because I got mad at a game of Call of Duty, not saying that I've done that,
Yeah.
but it's still that was my conscious choice and not necessarily Call of Duty or somebody in Call of Duty that would have done
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to go and be like, Call of Duty, you caused me to throw the controller.
it. Right.
No, that's ridiculous.
So yeah, I I think that this was a smart idea by the Supreme Court to not address this, to still allow for accountability to be on the individual actor.
I agree. Yep.
All right. Something that we've covered a bit before and now has come up again. Looks like Samsung is going to be sticking with Google as its default mobile search engine, which is
Mm.
a big win here for Google. And looks like Bing is surely out of luck, unfortunately. So Samsung's internet browser does come pre-installed on Samsung's phone. It's long used Google as its default search engine, and Google employees were shocked to learn that Samsung has been contemplating switching to Bing. Um, However, it looks like Samsung is choosing to stick with Google and is not going forward with the deal of going switching to Bing for its um, pre-installed or default search engine with on Samsung's phones. And uh, what do you think that this decision signifies in terms of the relationship between smartphones and their search engine providers?
Mm. Um, I think smartphones are, I think I'll say this. I think smartphone companies are less worried about it. I don't know if Samsung switching to Bing as their default would have caused a lot of consumers of Samsung to switch. It could, but I personally don't think that's a huge factor, especially if there's alternatives, if they allow alternatives to be on their platform, on their phones. But I think the internet provider, they are more worried about these relationships than the phone companies are. But I think your mic went out.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I really think Google is the one that is really worried about whether Google is default or not on
Yeah.
Samsung or Apple devices.
Yeah, I bet Google is just so relieved that the deal went through. They must have good relationships. They must have some phenomenal account executive or account manager that just is they wined and dined Samsung to the T,
Yes.
you know. Um but yeah, I do think there's a big battle now. I think Google in the past wasn't too worried about competitors. I think they have always been the dominant force when it comes to web browsing. Uh, but now that we have Bing associated with what is it? Microsoft
Chat
Edge.
Chat GPT is now in Bing.
Oh, sorry, that's what I mean. Yeah, sorry. Now that Chat GPT is in Bing and associated with it, that changes things. Now I don't know if it works mobile. I've never used it on a mobile situation, but given that there's a mobile app now for ChatGPT, I assume it was not mobile.
I
Um,
know it does work on mobile. I've used it a little bit, but to me it hasn't been as smooth as I wanted it to be. It wasn't smooth enough that I kept using it.
got it. Got it. The point I'm making is the competition among the web browsers and the value that each provide, it's starting to heat up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Google's realizing that because Samsung became hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I yeah, I personally think that it's the web browsers that are really pushing the strong relationships here. and not necessarily the phone carriers, which gives the leverage in the phone providers' hands, right?
Hmm.
They can say, well, Bing's offering us a lot of money. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And, Google kind of has to play into that hand.
Yeah.
So,
They've got to at least match or pay more in
yep.
order to keep it in. Because now there's less incentive to stay with Google as opposed to something else than
Yeah,
there was a year ago. Um,
exactly.
because I mean, Google has Bard, but it, yeah, it's Bard.
It
Yeah.
lives up to the name.
Yes.
Bard.
They should have gone with Barf.
Yeah. Follow
But
Tony Stark.
yeah, I mean that would have been a little bit better than Bard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I,
What?
I think I would agree with you. I think uh, Google and Microsoft are the ones um, that this affects more so than anything else. Where smartphone carriers are just like whatever's going to be cheaper type of a thing,
Yeah.
or what will get us more money. So yeah, I know Google does pay a lot of money to Samsung and as well to Apple just to have that default search engine.
Yeah. I agree.
So I guess good win for app or for Google there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Very good win for Google. They are wiping their brows and wiping the
Yes,
sweat off their brows
for now.
for now.
We'll
Yep.
see. We'll see how far that goes.
For real.
Um, Something new that has come up. It looks like the CEO of OpenAI is calling for the US to regulate artificial intelligence. It's
Yeah.
something that we've talked about a lot in the past about the potential of regulating this. But there is now um, call from the CEO of OpenAI to have it regulated. It looks like Sam Altman testified before the U.S. Senate committee a week ago about the possibilities and pitfalls of the new technology, and he said that a new agency should be formed to license AI companies, and ChatGPT and other similar programmers can create incredibly human-like answers to questions, but could also be widely inaccurate. And he's kind of been the spokesperson, and he has not shied away of addressing the ethical questions that AI raises. And he himself has been pushing for more regulations. So, I mean, not only have we seen the CEO of OpenAI, but we've also seen Elon Musk be an advocate of regulation of AI, and we've seen a lot of other tech influencers as well of these companies being pressing the importance of regulations in AI. And um, with that in mind, uh, what do you think? What do you think this will have on the effect for um, regulation of AI and the future of AI in general?
Yeah. Great question. I do think that US lawmakers were already somewhat wary of AI, but now having Sam um, Altman come in and say who's an expert in this field, right? I mean, runs OpenAI, and we can argue that OpenAI and ChatGPT was really this catalyst that started this AI revolution. Maybe it didn't start it, but it made AI mainstream, and now everyone's jumping on board with everything. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe there were companies before OpenAI and ChatGPT, but they were nowhere near as popular as this. And so having Sam Altman come in and say, "Hey guys, I'm in this day in and day out. There needs to be regulation here because this can be some sketchy stuff, and it can have some really big negative impacts. And honestly, I think it really woke up US lawmakers, both on Republican and Democratic side. And I think a lot of them realized we do need to get this under control. And I personally think there will be a regulatory body that will be created. Even even when I watched some of the conversation, and one of the Republican senators even asked Sam Altman if he asked him two things. He asked him, "What would you do if you created a regulatory body?" And Sam Altman had a list of things that he would do, and the regulations that he would enforce, and the tests that would need to pass. And then the senator asked him, "Would you be willing to head this regulatory body?" And Sam Altman responded, "I love my current job." And then the senator was like, "Do you know people?" And Sam Altman was like, "I know plenty of people who can do it, and we will send you a list of recommendations." So I think this is inevitable. This is going to happen. And my background being in auditing, having a regulator for financial statements, because people can be led astray and be misled and be scammed. This is very similar to that. People can really be harmed and misled and be manipulated with AI.
Yeah.
And so I do think there needs to be a regulatory body that puts the test and regulation and certification on certain AI. That way people can trust, oh, they've been audited by the AI regulatory board. Okay, they've passed certain tests that I know are trustworthy and I can trust them. So yeah, this is going to happen. I think Sam Altman is an awesome guy for being very honest about it. He doesn't have to be honest about it. He can, because he's an expert in it and because they're turning to him and so many people look to him, he could honestly manipulate to what he wants, but he's being honest. And I commend him for that. So in your opinion, do you think this is smart to have an AI regulatory body? And if so, or if not, what do you think the implications will be if there is one created? Because I personally think there will be one created, but what do you think the impact will be?
I think that there will be one created as well. I think this is going to be very good for AI to ensure that it doesn't get too out of hand, and that it's with and things are done ethically. And so I really think that this is a good idea. And I think if we do have this regulatory body, that it is going to better shape AI so that it is more ethical and it serves more as a tool rather than something that can be potentially used maliciously and harm people or systems or governments. That makes sense. What are your thoughts?
100%. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's kind of exactly what I was saying, that it needs to happen in order for there to be like a standard, right? That people can trust. Because if not, it's like Napster or LimeWire. Like
Yeah,
it can say it does one thing or be one thing, and then you open it up and it's absolute spam and malware and
right.
crap,
Hmm.
So
Oh, the good old days of Napster.
yeah, the good old days of Napster.
So yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a good step in the right direction, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds, and we'll be bringing that coverage to you as we see it. Speaking of things that are good, looks like Ford is going to be adding the Tesla plug to its electric vehicles in a surprising new development. So, Tesla and Ford have announced a partnership to onboard its latest electric vehicles on the former supercharging network. Ford will add the Tesla plug, which is now known as the North American Charging Standard. Interesting. to its electric vehicles. And when Tesla announced last year that it was going to be opening up its proprietary charging network to the industry in North America, um, it had been thought that it was a little bit too late. And since Teslas do not use the CCS standard, but it looks like Tesla just got a major partner on board, and Ford is going to be adding this plug to their existing vehicles here by the year 2025. And this will allow them to use the supercharging network that Tesla has, as well as using any of their destination chargers, and using, in what my opinion is, as a superior plug to what is allegedly the standard that is on every other electric
Yeah.
vehicle
Yeah, we talked
on
about
there.
this.
Yeah. And so, with that in mind, what implications do you think this is going to have on the EV industry as a whole?
Hmm. A couple things. From a consumer standpoint, I think it will make Tesla charging stations even busier,
Yes. I'm not
which
happy
is
about that.
yeah, which is like a negative for Tesla owners. I can already imagine like the fights that go on at Tesla charging stations. Like a Tesla's waiting to charge is like a Ford in his way. He's like, you're not even a Tesla. You're
Yeah.
subpar. You're not one of us. You're beneath me. You're not a Tesla. Get out of here.
I
You know,
know.
I could just see that happening. And just because I like they're already so busy, and so now you have like a mixed bag of vehicles that could come in. I from a different standpoint, I do think that Ford partnering with Tesla, it opens the door to other companies looking that way and thinking maybe we should do that because, in all honesty, you and I have talked about this. The Tesla charger is so much better than the
Mhm.
CCS, the standard. And
Yeah.
like that was when the CCS was established as the standard, we're like, this is not why is this the standard? Like it doesn't make sense. And so I think it will make other manufacturers look at this deal and second guess and maybe say, hmm, maybe we should also include a Tesla charging port just because, it allows flexibility, fluidity, better charging for the consumer, options for them to charge,
Mhm.
etc. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see more partnerships here. Um, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much have the same thoughts as you. I'm not excited for the fact that Tesla chargers are going to be more busy. However, I rarely use superchargers, so it's not like that huge deal. But the one-off times that I do need to use them, it's
They'll be
annoying.
busy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's annoying how busy they are now. And now that you introduce other vehicles into that just makes it worse. But as far as um, Ford adopting this um, kind of gives me more, I would say, more options and more confidence that I could buy a Ford and take it on a road trip,
Yeah.
um, and use it better because now it would have a wider adoption. I'd be able to use the Tesla supercharger network, which is already robust enough. I wouldn't say that it's it meets the needs of everyone, but it meets enough that people can go on road trips with their
Yeah.
Teslas.
Hmm.
And so with Ford doing this, it will allow Ford's that same ability rather than having to rely on the Electrify America network, which is hit or miss, based on the reviews that I've seen with the Electrify America. So I think it's going to be greater for EVs. It will open up more doors for people to have more options when they buy an EV. Um, and I'm really hoping that it expands more than just Ford, like for instance, Rivian, because they have the same standard as every other EV as well. So them being able to adopt this would be a great win for Rivian as well.
Yeah. And you.
Yes. In 5 years when I get my Rivian.
I saw a Rivian SUV on the road. They look nice.
Yes.
Nicia said she likes them a lot better than the trucks.
Yeah, I think that it looks a lot like a Range Rover, and I've
It
always
does.
I've always enjoyed the look of a Range Rover.
Yeah, same. Same. They're really clean, man. They're really clean. And the Rivian looked really clean.
Yeah.
They looked really good. So I'm excited for you in that aspect. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think, I mean, it said that Elon, what did he, for the supercharger, he like not open sourced it, but he essentially made it available for everyone, right? Do you think that Tesla's going to try and charge these manufacturers for using their technology, or do you think that they're just like, hey, go ahead and use it. That way more people can use our superchargers and we get our money that way.
So he's that's a good question. He's always said like he's wanted to have Tesla superchargers open to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is a cost when it comes to superchargers. And so I think that, there needs to be some sort of profit in for Tesla to be able to continue to expand and continue to upkeep these superchargers. And so I'm pretty sure that it would come pretty similar to how Apple licenses everything, all of its like accessories, like the made for Apple type of license.
Yeah.
Like in order for you to be certified for that, like each car will probably have to pay some sort of license to Tesla to be able to have this connector into it, just so it is certified to work with that. Because potentially, a manufacturer could put this in there. It's not up to spec. Then they go to plug into a supercharger, and that causes a lot of problems to supercharger, fires, explosions. Who knows what's going on?
Yeah.
So I think a licensing deal would need to be in effect, and that also places a lot of protections in for both Tesla and also for Ford, because now that it's kind of certifying that yes, these will work with the Tesla network.
Yeah. I agree. I agree that there's got to be some, I would assume there's got to be some kind of profitability here. You know, like Elon and the people that work at Tesla aren't stupid. They aren't
Correct.
going to just be giving out stuff for free and then paying for infrastructure for free. There's got to be some cost, and as a result, they're a company. They're a for-profit company, so they're going to
Mhm.
make some kind of profit out of this somehow.
Yeah.
Um, so whether that's like people who are on different vehicles that are non-Tesla pay per kilowatt or whatever it might be, I don't know. There's going to be some kind of profit here. The certification, that's probably a high likely chance of happening, what you were saying. So, um, and I don't mean like certification, what I mean is like the proper installation happened. And as a result, you're not on a Tesla, you're on a different vehicle, but it has a Tesla charger. Therefore, you have to pay to have that Tesla plug installed,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, I just kind of think there's got to be some profit here. So
Yeah. And I know like now that Tesla has opened up its supercharger network with the Magic Dock that uses the CCS standard for other electric vehicles. When another person comes to use that, they do have to pay through the app to one be able to access it and then also pay for the energy that they consume to charge their vehicle. So they've already got that in place. And so now with this, I would assume that it'd probably be some sort of similar thing, even if you have a
yeah,
Tesla connector.
I bet it is. I bet it's
Yeah.
a similar situation. So, well, that'd be cool. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
I mean, this opens up a lot of doors for not only Tesla, but for other EVs out there. And I think uh, as long as the infrastructure can keep up with it, I think this is a good win. And it'll be nice to have a better standard for EVs here in North America.
Yeah, For sure. Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, that's what we've got for you tonight. We've given you kind of the latest developments of artificial intelligence, including some of the um, new language models and where they're going to be located. And we're excited to continue to share news stories with you in the future. So please make sure you give us a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, that other button seems to be all right as well. Make sure that you send it to somebody you dislike. Send it to somebody you dislike if you really dislike this video. Um, we could also impose the old I guess, email chain hack as well, that if you don't send this to 7 people after you watch it, you will have a curse. It'll probably be a bad curse. So make sure you send it to
You
7.
better share it then. You
Yeah,
better share it.
you better share it. 7
You better
people.
share it.
You've been warned. But as always, we really do appreciate everyone's support. So please make sure that you give us a thumbs up. We really do appreciate it. Until next time, have a wonderful evening. Stay classy, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Peace.